She wore a $90 hoodie, so they assumed she was a nobody. She held a valid first-class boarding pass, but they treated her like a fraud. When the senior flight attendant smirked, ripped up her ticket, and pointed to the back of the plane, she didn't realize she wasn't just insulting a passenger. She was declaring war on the woman who owned the very fuel in the plane's wings. It took one text message, 30 minutes of silence, and a fleet of federal vehicles to teach Stratford Airlines a lesson the world would never forget. This is the story of the $30 million mistake. The fluorescent lights of JFK's Terminal 4 hummed with the manic energy of a Friday evening. For most, the noise was stress-inducing. The clatter of suitcases, the crying of exhausted toddlers, the drone of gate announcements. For Elara Vance, it was white noise. It was the sound of logistics, and logistics was her life. Elara adjusted the strap of her battered leather messenger bag. It looked like something a college student might pick up at a thrift store, worn at the corners and stained with coffee. Inside that bag, however, sat a laptop containing the digital keys to Vance Global Logistics, a supply chain behemoth that quietly moved 40% of the distinct air freight along the eastern seaboard. Elara wasn't just a CEO. She was the architect of the modern, just-in-time delivery system. But tonight, she didn't look like a titan of industry. She looked like Elara from apartment 4B. She wore black leggings, comfortable running sneakers, and an oversized grey hoodie from her alma mater, MIT. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and dark circles under her eyes told the story of a 72-hour negotiation marathon in Manhattan that had just saved 3,000 jobs in the Midwest. She just wanted to sleep. She approached the gate for Stratford Airlines Flight 902 to London Heathrow. She had treated herself. It was a rare indulgence, but she had booked seat 1A, first class, lie flat, with the privacy partition. She needed the 7 hours of deep sleep before landing in London for a meeting with the European Trade Commission. Boarding Group 1, first class and Diamond Medallion members, you are welcome to board, the gate agent announced. Elara stepped forward. She held her phone out, the QR code for her first-class ticket glowing on the screen. The gate agent, a young man named Todd, who looked like he'd been working a double shift, scanned it. The machine beeped a pleasant green. "Welcome aboard, Miss Vance," Todd said, barely looking up. "Enjoy your flight." Elara nodded, walking down the jet bridge. The cool air of the tunnel hit her, smelling of jet fuel and damp carpet. She took a deep breath. Just get to the seat. Champagne. Sleep. She stepped onto the aircraft. The mood lighting was set to a calming purple. To her left was the cockpit. To her right, the sanctuary of the first-class cabin. Standing at the bulkhead, arms crossed over a pristine navy blue uniform, was the senior purser. Her name tag read, Karen Carrie Sterling. She had blonde hair sprayed into a helmet of perfection and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was scanning the passengers with the scrutiny of a bouncer at an exclusive club. Elara smiled politely and moved to step into the first-class cabin. "Excuse me," Carrie said. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the ambient boarding music. She stepped sideways, physically blocking the aisle. Elara stopped, confused. "Hi, I'm in 1A." Carrie looked Elara up and down. Her gaze lingered on the sneakers, then the hoodie, and finally the messy bun. She let out a short, derisive breath through her nose. "Can I see your boarding pass, please?" Carrie asked, her tone suggesting she was asking a child for a hall pass. Elara held up her phone again. "Sure, 1A, Elara Vance." Carrie didn't look at the phone. She looked at Elara. "Miss, this is the first-class cabin. Economy boarding is generally done after we've settled our priority guests. If you could just step back to the jet bridge and wait for Group 4. That would be helpful. Ilara blinked. I'm not in Group 4. I'm in Group 1. I paid for this seat. It's right there. She pointed to the empty suite in the front corner. Digital tickets can be glitchy, Carrie said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that wasn't quiet enough. Sometimes the system upgrades people by mistake who don't meet the profile. I need to verify this manually. Verify it then, Ilara said, her patience thinning. I'm tired and I'd like to sit down. Carrie snatched the phone from Ilara's hand, a violation of protocol so flagrant Ilara almost laughed. Carrie tapped the screen aggressively, scrolling back and forth. Ilara Vance. Carrie read the name like it was a bad taste in her mouth. And how did you acquire this ticket, Ms. Vance? Employee friends and family pass? Lottery winner? I bought it, Ilara said, her voice hardening, with an American Express Centurion card. Now may I sit? Just then, heavy footsteps echoed behind Ilara. A man in a bespoke charcoal suit, carrying a Toomey briefcase and smelling of expensive scotch and entitlement, pushed up the jet bridge. What's the hold-up? The man boomed. I've got a scotch waiting for me. Carrie's face instantly transformed. The sneer vanished, replaced by a beaming, sycophantic radiance. Mr. Holloway, she chirped. Welcome back. So good to see you again. Bradford Holloway. Ilara recognized him instantly. He was a mid-level hedge fund manager who had been on the cover of a few business magazines, mostly for shorting pharmaceutical stocks. He was known for being loud, brash, and notoriously difficult in negotiations. Carrie, darling, Holloway grinned, ignoring Ilara completely. Let's get this show on the road. I'm in 1A today. My lucky seat. Ilara froze. Excuse me? Carrie turned back to Ilara, her face hardening again. Ms. Vance, there seems to be a conflict. Mr. Holloway is one of our global services members. He flies this route weekly. I don't care if he flies it hourly, Ilara said, her voice calm but icy. I have a confirmed reservation for seat 1A. It was booked 3 weeks ago. It is non-refundable and fully paid. Holloway finally looked at Ilara. He laughed, a dry, barking sound. Honey, look at you. You look like you're delivering my Uber Eats, not flying first. Let the adults talk. He stepped around her, brushing against her shoulder, and dropped his bag onto the seat of 1A. Her seat. Ilara felt the heat rise in her neck. It wasn't the insult. She'd been underestimated by men in suits her whole life. It was the injustice. That is my seat, Ilara repeated, looking Carrie dead in the eye. Carrie stood tall, pulling herself up to her full height. Ms. Vance, I am the senior purser on this vessel. I have the authority to manage the seating arrangements for the safety and comfort of all passengers. Clearly, there has been a double booking error in the system. Mr. Holloway is a priority client. You will be reaccommodated. Reaccommodated to where? Carrie typed something on a tablet she pulled from her pocket. I have a seat available in 34B. It's a middle seat, but it gets you to London. Or you can deboard and take up the issue with the gate agent, which will likely result in you missing the flight entirely. It was an ultimatum. It was extortion. 34B, Ilara repeated. You're kicking me out of a $10,000 suite into a middle seat in economy because he, she gestured to Holloway, who was already sipping a pre-departure drink, looks the part and I don't? I'm moving you because I am the authority here, Carrie snapped, her veneer of customer service vanishing completely. Now take your bag and move to the back, or I will have the air marshals escort you off for disruptive behavior. We have a schedule to keep. Disruptive behavior. The magic words. If Ilara argued further, she would be branded unruly. She would end up on a no-fly list. She would miss the Trade Commission meeting. The merger deal relied on her presence in London. Elara Vance took a breath. She looked at Holloway, who was ignoring her. She looked at Carrie, whose eyes danced with malicious triumph. "Okay," Elara whispered. "Smart choice," Carrie said, handing Elara a printed slip for seat 34B. "The back is that way. Keep walking until you hit the toilets." Elara took the slip. She tightened her grip on her messenger bag. She turned and began the long walk down the aisle, past the lie-flat beds of business class, past the extra legroom of premium economy, into the tight, crowded rows of the main cabin. She didn't scream. She didn't shout. But as she walked, she slid her phone out of her pocket. She wasn't opening Twitter to complain. She wasn't opening Instagram to live stream. She opened her contacts and scrolled to the letter D. The walk to row 34 felt like a funeral procession for her dignity. As Elara passed through the business class curtain, she could feel the eyes of other passengers on her. They had seen the commotion at the front. They saw a woman in a hoodie being sent back, and their biases filled in the blanks. She tried to sneak in. She couldn't afford it. She caused a scene. A woman in row 12 whispered to her husband, "I hate it when people try to scam upgrades. It holds everyone up." Elara kept her face neutral, staring straight ahead. She was a master of compartmentalization. In the boardroom, when stocks tanked, she was calm. When unions threatened to strike, she was calm. She channeled that ice-cold focus now. She reached row 34. It was in the absolute rear of the plane, directly in front of the lavatories. The air here was stagnant and warm. Seat 34 to B was the middle seat in a block of 3. To the left, in 34A, was a large man who had already fallen asleep, his elbow encroaching 3 inches into Elara's space. To the right, in 34C, was a young mother with an infant who was currently screaming at a decibel level that made Elara's teeth ache. Elara stowed her bag under the seat in front of her. There was no overhead bin space left. It was filled with the oversized carry-ons of the people sitting 20 rows ahead. She sat down, her knees pressed into the plastic tray table of the seat in front. The man in 34A snorted in his sleep and shifted, pinning her shoulder against the seat. Carrie came walking down the aisle a moment later, doing her safety check. She wasn't checking seatbelts. She was doing a victory lap. She stopped at row 34. She loomed over Elara. "Comfortable?" Carrie asked, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "I'm seated," Elara said, not looking up from her phone. "Make sure that phone is in airplane mode," Carrie commanded. "We are pushing back in 5 minutes, and Ms. Vance, if I hear one peep out of you, one complaint, one sigh, I will have the pilot turn this plane around. Do you understand? You are on thin ice." Elara finally looked up. Her eyes were dark, unreadable pools. "I understand perfectly, Carrie. You've made your position very clear." "Good." Carrie turned on her heel, her ponytail swishing. "Cabin crew, arm doors and cross-check." Elara looked down at her phone. She had 2 bars of signal left. The plane doors were closed, but they hadn't pushed back yet. She opened her secure messaging app. She didn't text a customer service bot. She didn't text her assistant. She texted David Chen. David Chen wasn't just a contact. He was the Director of Operations for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. He was the man responsible for every runway, every fuel truck, and every vendor contract at JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark. More importantly, David Chen had been Elara's classmate at MIT. And 6 months ago, Vance Global Logistics had signed a massive, exclusive contract to supply the avionics maintenance software and the jet fuel logistics for Stratford Airlines at this specific hub. Elara. "David, are you at the command center?" The 3 dots appeared instantly. David. Ilara. Yeah, I'm pulling a late one. Everything okay? I thought you were flying out tonight. Ilara. I am. Flight 902, Stratford Airlines. I need you to check the vendor compliance agreement for the fuel services contract. Clause 14B. David. Clause 14B? That's the Material Breach and Safety Audit clause. Ilara, what's going on? Ilara. I was just denied my paid first-class seat based on appearance. The purser, Karen Sterling, gave it to a hedge fund manager and threatened me with arrest. She falsified the manifest to claim a double booking. That's fraud, David. And under our contract, if Stratford commits fraud against a Vance logistics executive, we have the right to immediate asset verification. David. You're kidding. They bumped you? Do they know who you are? Ilara. No, and I don't want them to know. Not yet. I want you to execute the clause. I want a full safety and compliance audit of this aircraft. Immediately. David. Ilara. If I call a code red audit, that plane doesn't move. The fuel trucks disengage. The baggage handlers walk. The FAA gets flagged. It grounds the flight. Ilara. Do it. David. Copy that. Give me 3 minutes. Watch the window. Ilara put her phone into her pocket. She closed her eyes. The baby next to her screamed. The man to her left snored. The plane jolted. The engines began to whine, spooling up for pushback. And then, silence. The engine whine died down. The plane didn't move. 2 minutes passed. From the window of 34C, the young mother looked out. Why are the trucks coming back? Ilara leaned forward slightly to look past the mother. Outside, on the tarmac, 3 bright yellow fuel trucks that bore the logo Vance Logistics were reversing away from the aircraft. But they weren't just leaving. They were parking horizontally across the taxiway, blocking the plane's path. Then, the flashing blue lights appeared. Up in the cockpit, Captain Mark Reynolds frowned at his instruments. The ready-for-pushback light had just flickered from green to red. "Tower, this is Stratford 902, Reynolds said into his headset. "We just lost our clearance. What's the hold-up? We're fully boarded and buttoned up." The radio crackled. The voice from the tower sounded tense. "Stratford 902, hold your position. We have a stop order issued by the Port Authority Director. Do not, I repeat, do not start engines." A stop order? Reynolds looked at his co-pilot, confused. For what? Weather? Negative 902. Administrative hold. Ground services have been suspended for your airline effective immediately. You are to remain at the gate. Suspended? What the hell does that mean? Suddenly the cockpit door opened. Carrie burst in, looking annoyed. "Captain, the passengers are getting restless. Why aren't we moving? Mr. Halloway needs another scotch and we're out of ice." "We're grounded, Carrie," Reynolds snapped. "Tower says ground services have been suspended." "Suspended?" Carrie scoffed. "Probably a union thing. Just tell them we'll be 10 minutes. "It's not a union thing," the co-pilot said, pointing out the window. "Look." Carrie leaned over the console. Below, a convoy of black SUVs with government plates was swarming the tarmac. They weren't police cars. They were Port Authority operations and FAA compliance vehicles. "What is going on?" Carrie whispered. Back in row 34, the temperature was rising. The auxiliary power unit, APU, seemed to be struggling, or perhaps they had cut it to save fuel. The air was getting heavy. The intercom clicked on. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We are experiencing a slight administrative delay. We hope to have more information for you shortly. Please remain seated." A collective groan rippled through the economy cabin. Carrie marched down the aisle, her heels clicking aggressively. She grabbed the intercom handset at the rear of the plane, right next to Ilara's ear. "Everyone sit down!" she barked into the phone, her voice echoing through the cabin. "We are handling a minor issue. Stop pressing the call buttons." She slammed the handset back into the cradle. She looked down at Ilara, who was sitting quietly, hands folded in her lap. "You," Carrie hissed. "You did something, didn't you? You texted someone." Ilara looked up, her expression serene. "I thought you said the system was glitchy, Carrie. Maybe the system is just correcting itself." "Don't play games with me." Carrie pointed a manicured finger in Ilara's face. "I saw you on your phone. If you posted a tweet and caused a security scare, I will personally sue you for every penny you have." Ilara almost smiled. "You really should be worrying about your own pennies, Carrie." "Is that a threat?" Carrie's voice rose, attracting the attention of the surrounding passengers. "Did you hear that? She threatened me. This passenger is a security risk." The baby next to Ilara started crying harder. "I didn't threaten you," Ilara said calmly. "I just stated a fact. You profiled me. You denied me a service I paid for. And you lied about the reason. Karma has a way of balancing the ledger." "That's it." Carrie grabbed her radio. "Captain, I need security at row 34 immediately. The passenger from the earlier incident is making threats against the crew. She claims to be responsible for the delay." Up in the front, Bradford Halloway stood up, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. "Hey, I have a merger to close in London. Get this plane in the air or I'm calling the CEO of Stratford." Carrie rushed back to the front to appease her VIP. "Mr. Halloway, please sit down. It's the woman from earlier. She's sabotaging the flight. We're having her removed now." "Well, hurry up!" Halloway yelled. "Throw her off." The plane door, the main cabin door at the front, thumped heavily. Someone was knocking from the outside. Not the polite knock of a gate agent, the heavy, authoritative pounding of law enforcement. Carrie brightened. Finally, the police. She unlocked the door and swung it open, putting on her best victim face. "Oh, thank goodness you're here, officers," Carrie said, breathlessly. "She's in seat 34B. She's been aggressive. She's refusing instructions. And I believe she's intoxicated." Standing in the jet bridge were not regular airport cops. Standing there were 4 men in dark suits, wearing badges around their necks that read FA Inspector and Port Authority Audit Division. Behind them were 2 uniformed Port Authority police officers, and in the center of them stood a tall Asian American man in a sharp grey suit. He didn't look at Carrie. He looked past her, scanning the length of the plane. "I am Director David Chen," the man announced, his voice projecting clearly without shouting. "Who is the purser in charge of this flight?" Carrie faltered, her smile dropping. I am. "Karen Sterling." "Sir, the disruptive passenger is in the back." David Chen held up a hand, silencing her. He stepped onto the plane. The air in the cabin shifted instantly. This wasn't a removal. This was a raid. "Ms. Sterling," Chen said, his voice cold steel. "I am not here for a passenger. I am here because this aircraft is currently operating in violation of its vendor contracts with the airport." "What?" Carrie blinked. "I don't understand." "We have received a verified report of manifest fraud," Chen said, stepping closer. "Specifically, the falsification of passenger records to obscure an involuntary denied boarding. That is a federal offense, Ms. Sterling, and it puts your airline in breach of its fuel and logistics contract." Carrie's face went pale. "Manifest fraud? No, there was a double booking. The system logs show no double booking," Chen cut her off. "The system shows you manually overrode a confirmed ticket holder, Ms. Ilara Vance, and assigned her seat to a standby passenger, Mr. Bradford Halloway. A pin could have dropped in the cabin." Bradford Halloway, hearing his name, poked his head out of Suite 1A. "Now wait a minute. I'm a Global Services member." Chen ignored him. He looked down the long aisle of the plane. "Miss Vance?" Chen called out. From the back of the plane, in the middle seat of row 34, Ilara unbuckled her seatbelt. She stood up. She pulled her hoodie down to straighten it. "I'm here, David," she said. The passengers in economy turned to look at the woman in the hoodie. "Miss Vance?" David Chen said, his tone shifting to one of immense respect. "My apologies for the delay. The airport authority has grounded this aircraft pending a full audit of Stratford Airline's adherence to the Civil Rights Act and the Vendor Fair Practice Agreement." Carrie looked back and forth between the director of the Port Authority and the woman in the hoodie. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Wait," Carrie stammered. You know her?" David Chen looked at Carrie with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Ms. Sterling," Chen said, "you just kicked the CEO of Vance Global Logistics out of her seat. Do you know who fills the tanks of this plane?" "She does." "Do you know who manages the software that tracks your luggage?" "She does." "You didn't just insult a passenger. You just tried to bully the woman who owns the ground you're standing on." The silence that descended upon the cabin of Flight 902 was absolute. It was a physical weight, pressing against the eardrums of every soul on board. The earlier murmurs of annoyance, the crying of the infant, the rustling of newspapers. It all evaporated. In the galley the coffee pot hissed, a lonely sound in the vacuum of shock. Karen Carrie Sterling stood rooted to the spot near the cockpit door. Her hand was still half raised, as if she were trying to physically ward off the words David Chen had just spoken. CEO, Vance Global Logistics, the fuel contract. The concepts swirled in her mind like debris in a tornado, refusing to land. She looked at the man in the grey suit, David Chen, hoping to see a flicker of a smile, a sign that this was a prank, a cruel joke played by a bored airport official. But David Chen's face was granite. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking past her, down the long, narrow tunnel of the fuselage, waiting. At the very back of the plane, in row 34, Ilara Vance moved with agonizing slowness. She didn't jump up. She didn't shout, "I told you so." She simply bent down, reached under the seat in front of her, and grasped the worn leather handle of her messenger bag. The friction of the leather against the cheap airplane carpet made a scratching sound that seemed to echo all the way to first class. She stood up. The overhead lights reflected off the messy bun of hair she hadn't bothered to fix. She adjusted her MIT hoodie, pulling the sleeves down over her wrists. To her right, the young mother in 34C, who had been so exhausted and frantic moments ago, stared up at Ilara with wide, saucer-like eyes. She pulled her legs back, pressing them tight against her seat, instinctively making way for royalty in disguise. "Excuse me," Ilara whispered softly to the woman. Ilara stepped into the aisle. The walk from row 34 to row 1 is approximately 100 feet. Tonight, it felt like a mile. As Ilara began to walk, she kept her head high, her gaze fixed on the open cockpit door at the far end. She passed row 30. The man who had whispered about scammers earlier quickly buried his face in an in-flight magazine, his ears burning a bright crimson. She passed row 20. A teenager took his headphones off, sensing the shift in the air, and raised his phone to record. She passed the curtain dividing economy from Comfort Plus. Every step was a reclamation of dignity. With every row she passed, the narrative in the cabin shifted. 10 minutes ago, she was the disruption, the problem, the trash that needed to be taken out. Now, she was the predator, and the crew were the prey. When she finally crossed the threshold into the first-class cabin, the air was cooler, smelling of the fresh orchids placed in the galley. She stopped 3 feet from Carrie. Up close, the details of Carrie's unraveling were visceral. The senior purser, who had been an impenetrable wall of condescension, was shaking. A bead of sweat had broken through the heavy foundation on her forehead, trickling down the side of her nose. Her perfect posture had collapsed. Her shoulders were hunched, her breathing shallow and rapid. Elara didn't scream. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at Carrie. It was a look of profound disappointment, the kind a parent gives a child who has broken something they can never replace. "You told me to wait for the police," Elara said. Her voice was low, melodic, and terrifyingly calm. "So I waited." Carrie's lips parted. Ms. Vance, I didn't." Her voice cracked, dry and brittle. "The manifest. It just said. It didn't have your title. It just said Elara." "And that made it okay?" Elara asked. She took a half-step closer. "If I were a teacher, would it have been okay to lie to me? If I were a nurse? If I were a student?" "No, Carrie stammered, her eyes darting to David Chen for help, but finding none. "You didn't check the manifest for a double booking, Carrie," Elara continued, her eyes drilling into the flight attendant. "You checked my clothes, you checked my hair, and you decided I didn't belong in your world." Elara gestured to the leather bag in her hand. "This bag contains the contracts that keep this airline running, and you treated its owner like a vagrant because I prioritize comfort over vanity when I work a 90-hour week." Carrie looked like she was going to be sick. She gripped the bulkhead wall for support. "I can fix this," she whispered, desperation clawing at her throat. I can move you back. We can ask Mr. Halloway to move. I can get you a voucher, a free flight, anywhere in the world." Elara let out a short, humorless laugh. "A voucher? You think I want a voucher for Stratford Airlines?" "Hey!" The booming voice shattered the intimate tension of the standoff. Bradford Halloway surged out of seat 1A, stepping into the galley space. He held his glass of scotch, though the ice had mostly melted. His face was flushed, his tie loosened. He looked from Elara to David Chen, his irritation boiling over into arrogance. "I've been listening to this nonsense for 5 minutes," Halloway barked, pointing his glass at Elara. "So, she's a CEO. Big deal. I'm a managing partner at Sterling Halloway. I manage $2 billion in assets. Does that mean we have to hold the plane hostage while she gets an apology?" He turned to David Chen. "Officer, or whatever you are. Director. Look, clearly the stewardess made a mistake. It's embarrassing." "Fine. But I am not moving. I have a meeting in London that is worth more than this entire plane. So, write the lady a check, get her a seat on the next flight, and let us take off." Halloway took a sip of his scotch, looking satisfied, as if he had just solved a simple math problem for a room full of children. Elara slowly turned her head to look at Halloway. She didn't turn her body, just her head. "Mr. Halloway," Elara said, "you shorted Moderna in 2021 and lost $40 million. You're currently under investigation by the SEC for your trading practices regarding Techstar, and your meeting in London is a desperate attempt to secure liquidity from the shadowy Blackwood Group because your partners are threatening to vote you out." Halloway choked on his scotch. He coughed, sputtering, his face turning a deep, violet shade of red. How do you—" "I know," Elara said, "because Vance Logistics moves the servers for Techstar, and because I sit on the board of the bank that you're begging for a loan." Halloway froze. The glass in his hand shook, the ice clinking softly. "You're not a VIP, Mr. Halloway," Elara said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "You're a liability, and right now you're sitting in my seat." I paid full fare," Halloway mumbled, his bluster deflating like a punctured tire. "No," David Chen interrupted, stepping forward. He held up a tablet. Actually, Mr. Holloway, you didn't. You're on a standby upgrade status. You paid for business class. You were moved into first class, specifically because Miss Sterling manually removed Miss Vance from the system. That makes your ticket invalid. Chen turned to the two uniformed Port Authority police officers standing on the jet bridge. Officers, Chen said, please escort Mr. Holloway off the aircraft. His ticket is void due to fraudulent issuance. You can't do that, Holloway shouted, backing up against the cockpit door. I know people. I'll sue the airline. I'll sue the city. You can sue whoever you want from the terminal, Chen said calmly. Grab your bag, sir, or we will drag you. Holloway looked at the officers, then at Ilara. He saw no mercy in her eyes. He grabbed his briefcase from 1A, shoving past Carrie, muttering obscenities. As he was led off the plane, he didn't look back. The cabin was silent again. Now it was just Ilara, Carrie, and the government agents. Carrie was trembling violently now. The departure of Holloway had stripped her of her last defense. She was alone with the consequences. Ms. Sterling, David Chen said, his voice shifting from authoritative to procedural. This aircraft is now designated a crime scene regarding the federal investigation into vendor fraud. I am issuing a grounding order for Flight 902. Grounded, Carrie whispered. But the passengers. There are 300 people. They will be deplaned, Chen said, and rebooked on other airlines. Stratford Airlines will be footing the bill for every hotel room, every meal, and every transfer. And you, Ms. Sterling, are relieved of duty pending a drug and alcohol test and a formal interview. Drug test? Carrie gasped. I'm sober. It's standard procedure when a crew member exhibits erratic behavior and judgment that endangers the operational integrity of a flight, Chen said coldly. Hand over your badge. Carrie looked down at her chest, the silver wings she had worn for 15 years, the symbol of her authority. Her fingers shook so badly she couldn't undo the clasp. Ilara watched this. She didn't feel joy. She didn't feel triumph. She felt a heavy, somber resolution. Ilara, David said, turning to her. My car is downstairs. I can get you to a private charter. I can have you in London by morning. Ilara looked at the empty seat, 1A. Then she looked at Carrie, who was now weeping silently, fumbling with her name tag. No, Ilara said. I don't need a charter. She looked at Carrie. I want to finish this conversation. The deplaning of Flight 902 was unlike any disembarkation in the history of JFK. Usually, leaving a plane is a chaotic scramble for overhead bins, a symphony of clicking seatbelts and impatient shuffling. Tonight it was a silent, organized retreat. Captain Reynolds had made the announcement with a voice that sounded 10 years older than it had an hour ago. Ladies and gentlemen, due to a severe regulatory breach regarding flight operations, this aircraft has been grounded by the Port Authority. You are instructed to gather your belongings and exit the aircraft immediately. Agents are waiting at the gate to rebook you. He didn't say mechanical failure. He didn't say weather. He said regulatory breach. The vagueness terrified people more than a fire would have. As the economy passengers filed forward, dragging their carry-ons through the narrow aisle, they had to pass through the first-class cabin to exit. They saw the scene frozen in amber. They saw Ilara Vance, the woman in the hoodie, sitting calmly in seat 1A, the seat she had fought for. She wasn't drinking champagne. She wasn't reclining. She was sitting upright, hands folded on her lap, staring out the window at the wall of yellow fuel trucks blocking to the plane. They saw Carrie Sterling, the once imperious senior purser, sitting on the jump seat near the galley. Her head was in her hands. She was no longer checking boarding passes. She was weeping, her mascara running in dark, jagged lines down her cheeks. And they saw the men in suits, David Chen and the federal inspectors, standing guard like sentinels. No one said a word to Ilara. But as they passed, the dynamic had shifted. The judgment was gone, replaced by a mixture of fear and awe. The woman they had pitied in row 34 had stopped a Boeing 7707 with a text message. Leo, the teenager from row 20, didn't just walk past. As he shuffled by the galley, his phone was held low against his chest, the camera lens peeking out. He wasn't live streaming. He was recording everything in 4K. He zoomed in on Carrie's sobbing face. He panned to the Port Authority Audit Division badges. He ended the shot on Ilara's profile. Stoic, unmoving, powerful. As soon as Leo hit the jet bridge, he hit upload. He titled the video, "Stratford Airlines kicks black CEO to the back. She grounds the whole fleet." Karma, Annaho Stratford, is over. Within 10 minutes, while the passengers were still lining up at the rebooking counters, the video had 50,000 views. By the time the last passenger stepped off the plane, it had 1 million. The algorithm fed the fire. The comments section exploded. People identified Ilara Vance immediately. Vance Global Logistics wasn't a household name to consumers, but to the business world, she was a legend. Links to her Forbes profile started appearing in the thread. Then came the hashtag, #WasGroundStratford. Inside the corporate headquarters of Stratford Airlines in Chicago, it was 8 p.m. The offices were mostly empty, save for the Network Operations Control, NOC. The NOC was a room filled with giant screens tracking every Stratford flight globally. Usually, it was a quiet hum of efficiency. "Sir, we have a problem at JFK," a junior analyst called out, his voice trembling. "I know. Flight 902 is delayed." The night director sighed, not looking up from his coffee. "Crew time out?" "No, sir. It's blocked. Physically blocked." "Blocked by what?" "By the fuel vendor. Vance Logistics." The analyst pulled up a live feed from the JFK tower camera. The director looked at the screen. He saw the yellow trucks. He saw the police lights. Then his phone rang. It was the frantic gate agent from JFK. Then his email pinged, a Google alert for the airline's name. He clicked the link to Leo's video. He watched the first 30 seconds. He watched Carrie scream about disruptive behavior. He watched Ilara Vance get marched to the back. The color drained from the director's face. He didn't call the gate. He didn't call the pilot. He dialed the emergency line for Marcus Thorne, the Senior Vice President of Customer Experience and Brand Protection. "Marcus," the director said, his voice a dry rasp. "Wake up. We just committed suicide at JFK." Back on the plane, the silence was absolute. The passengers were gone. The cleaning crew had been barred from entering. It was just Ilara, David Chen, the auditors, and Carrie. "Miss Vance," David said softly, "the terminal is swarming with press. The video is out. If we leave now, we can get you out a back way." Ilara finally looked away from the window. "I'm not leaving yet, David. I'm waiting for the person who actually matters." "Who?" "The person Carrie is terrified of," Ilara said, glancing at the flight attendant. Carrie flinched. She knew who was coming. She knew because her company tablet had been buzzing incessantly in her pocket for the last 10 minutes. Messages from her base manager. Messages from the union rep. Messages that simply said, "What did you do?" At 9:15 p.m., heavy footsteps thundered down the jet bridge. A man burst onto the plane. He was breathless, his tie askew, sweat shining on his balding head. He wore a suit that cost more than a mid-sized car. It was Marcus Thorne. He had been at a charity dinner in Manhattan when he got the call. He had run through the terminal, bypassing security with his credentials, desperate to stop the bleeding. He stopped in the galley, heaving for breath. He looked at the auditors. He looked at Carrie, who shrank back into the jump seat as if trying to disappear. Then he looked at Elara Vance. He put on a smile. It was a practiced, corporate smile, the kind designed to disarm lawsuits. "Ms. Vance," Thorne said, stepping forward with his hand extended. "I'm Marcus Thorne, Senior VP of Stratford. I am so incredibly sorry. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. Please, let's resolve this. I have a helicopter standing by to take you to Titterborough. We have a private Gulf Stream fueled and ready to take you to London right now. On us." Elara didn't shake his hand. She didn't stand up. She just watched him. "A Gulf Stream," Elara repeated. "Yes." Thorne nodded eagerly. "Whatever you need. We will make this right. We just need to release the ground hold. The truck's outside. They're yours, I understand? It's a bit of a misunderstanding, but if you could just make a call." "A misunderstanding," Elara said, tasting the word. She gestured to the empty seat across the aisle from her. "Seat 1D. Sit down, Marcus." Thorne hesitated. He was used to commanding rooms, not being ordered around on his own airplanes, but he looked at the federal auditors who were watching him with stone-cold expressions. He sat. "We have a lot to talk about," Elara said, "and I don't think a free plane ride is going to cover it." The cabin of the Boeing 777 felt like a courtroom. The mood lighting had been turned off by the flight deck crew before they left, leaving only the harsh, bright cleaning lights on. It exposed everything, the stains on the carpet, the crumbs on the seats, and the sheer panic in Marcus Thorne's eyes. Thorne smoothed his tie, trying to regain his footing. He was a fixer. He had buried scandals before. He had paid off politicians, silenced whistleblowers, and spun PR disasters into learning opportunities. "Ms. Vance," Thorne began, his voice lowered to a confidential, soothing tone. "I've seen the video. What Miss Sterling did was unacceptable, truly. She violated our core values of inclusivity and respect. I want you to know that as of this moment, she is being placed on unpaid leave. We will conduct a review, and I can almost guarantee her employment will be terminated." In the corner, Carrie let out a soft, choked sob. "Mr. Thorne, please. I followed the protocol for priority passengers. Mr. Halloway was a Global Services member." "Quiet!" Thorne snapped, whipping his head around to glare at her. The veneer of the nice guy vanished instantly. "You caused a federal grounding, Sterling. You didn't follow protocol. You profiled a VIP and humiliated the airline. Do not speak again." He turned back to Elara, his smile returning like a light switch. "You see," Thorne said, "we are handling the bad apple. She's gone. You have my word. Now, about the lawsuit. I'm authorized to offer a settlement right here. $2 million, a donation to a charity of your choice, and a non-disclosure agreement regarding the specific details of the contract breach." He pulled a gold pen from his pocket. "We just need those trucks moved, Elara. Every minute this plane sits here, it costs us $50,000. And the press outside, it's getting out of hand." Elara listened patiently. She picked up a bottle of water from the console, cracked it open, and took a slow sip. $2 million, Elara mused. "That's a lot of money, Marcus." "It is," Thorne nodded, sensing a victory. "It's a gesture of our goodwill. And you think Carrie is the problem," Elara added. "She is the problem," Thorne insisted. "She went rogue." "No, Marcus," Elara said, her voice hardening. "She didn't go rogue. She did exactly what your culture trained her to do." Elara leaned forward. The air in the cabin seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I've looked at your internal memos, Marcus. My team analyzed them when we bid for the fuel contract. Stratford Airlines incentivizes pursers to prioritize high-value male travelers over all others. You have a bonus structure that rewards crews for upgrading global services members at the expense of non-status passengers. You call it yield protection. Carrie wasn't acting on a whim. She was trying to hit her quarterly bonus. Thorne's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked like he had been slapped. "How? That's confidential proprietary data," he whispered. "I'm your vendor," Ilara said, cold. "I have access to your operational logic to optimize fuel loads. I read everything." She stood up. She walked over to where Carrie was sitting. Carrie flinched, expecting a blow. Ilara looked down at the weeping flight attendant. "She's prejudiced," Ilara said to Thorne. "She looked at a black woman in a hoodie and saw a problem, not a passenger. That's on her. But you?" She pointed at Thorne. "You built the system that rewarded her for it. You gave her the gun and told her to shoot." Ilara turned back to David Chen. "David, what is the status of the fuel supply agreement?" David Chen stepped forward, opening a leather folder. "Ms. Vance, under Clause 14b, the Moral Turpitude and Safety Clause, if the airline engages in discriminatory practices that harm the reputation of the vendor has the right to suspend services immediately across all hubs." Thorne's eyes bulged. "Suspend services? You can't be serious. We have 300 flights leaving the East Coast tomorrow morning. If you don't fuel them, they don't fly," Ilara finished the sentence for him. "You would ground the entire eastern seaboard?" Thorne gasped. "Do you know the chaos that would cause? The stock price would tank. It would bankrupt us." "It's already tanking, Marcus," Ilara said calmly. "I just checked the after-hours trading. Stratford is down 12% since the video went up. By morning, when the market opens, it will be a bloodbath." Thorne stood up, his hands shaking. Okay, you win. What do you want? 10 million? 20? Name the number. I'll wake up the board. Just tell the trucks to move." Ilara shook her head. "I don't want your money. I have plenty of my own." "Then what?" Thorne screamed, losing his composure completely. "What do you want?" "I want a confession," Ilara said. "A what?" "I want a public press conference," Ilara detailed. "Not a written statement, not a tweet. I want you, the CEO, and Carrie standing at a podium tomorrow morning. I want you to admit that your yield protection policy exists. I want you to admit it encourages discrimination, and I want you to dismantle it. Publicly." Thorne laughed nervously. "We can't do that. The liability, the class action lawsuits, it would destroy the company." "Then I guess your planes don't fly tomorrow," Ilara said, checking her watch. "It's 9:30 p.m. The morning fuel shifts start at 4 a.m. You have 6.5 hours to decide if Stratford Airlines still exists tomorrow." She picked up her messenger bag. She turned to Carrie. "And as for you," Ilara said. Carrie looked up, her eyes red and swollen. She looked small, defeated, and pitiable. The arrogance was gone, burned away by the reality of her destruction. "I'm not going to sue you," Ilara said softly. "I don't need to destroy you. You've done that yourself. The internet is forever, Carrie. Every time someone Googles your name for the rest of your life, they will see that video. You will never work in the sky again." Ilara leaned in close. "I hope the quarterly bonus was worth it." Ilara turned and walked toward the exit door. "Ilara, wait!" Thorne scrambled after her, grabbing the doorframe. "You can't just walk away. We need to negotiate." Ilara paused at the top of the jet bridge. She looked back at the chaotic, empty cabin, the symbol of corporate greed brought to its knees by one overlooked woman. "I'm not negotiating, Marcus," she said. "I'm executing a contract." She walked up the jet bridge, her sneakers squeaking softly on the floor. David Chen and the federal agents followed her, leaving Marcus Thorne and Carrie Sterling alone in the hollow metal tube, surrounded by the silence of a grounding that was just beginning. As Ilara emerged into the terminal, the flashbulbs erupted. The press had arrived. The sun rose over JFK International Airport, but for Stratford Airlines, it was the darkest morning in company history. The 4 a.m. deadline had come and gone. The fuel trucks from Vance Global Logistics had not moved. In fact, they had been joined by union representatives from the Baggage Handlers Association, who, seeing the viral tide turning, decided to stand in solidarity with Ilara Vance. At 7 a.m., the departures board at Terminal 4 was a sea of red text. Cancelled. 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 The eastern seaboard was paralyzed. Thousands of passengers were stranded. The stock market opened at 9:30 a.m., and Stratford Airlines, ticker STRAT, didn't just dip, it plummeted. The stock lost 22% of its value in the first 15 minutes of trading, a loss of nearly $1.4 billion in market cap. At 10 a.m., the press conference began. It wasn't held in a hotel ballroom. It was held on the tarmac, right in front of the grounded Flight 902. Marcus Thorne stood at the podium. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. Beside him, looking small and pale in a plain grey suit, was Carrie Sterling. She had been stripped of her uniform. Cameras from CNN, BBC, and Fox News zoomed in. "We are here today," Thorne spoke into the bouquet of microphones, his voice shaking, "to admit to a systemic failure within our organization. We acknowledge the existence of the Yield Protection Protocol, which unfairly prioritized status over confirmed contracts. Effective immediately, this policy is abolished." He paused, swallowing hard. "Furthermore, we accept the resignation of our senior purser, Ms. Sterling, and we are currently cooperating with the SEC regarding an investigation into insider trading by one of our passengers, Mr. Bradford Halloway, whose illicit activities were brought to light during yesterday's events." The cameras flashed blindingly. Ilara Vance watched the broadcast from the quiet comfort of the Vance Logistics Control Tower, high above the tarmac. She held a mug of hot tea. David Chen stood beside her. "You did it," David said, looking at the screen. "You forced a Fortune 500 company to its knees." "I didn't force them," Ilara said, taking a sip. "I just turned on the lights. They were the ones standing in the filth." 6 months later, the karma that hit back wasn't just a wave, it was a tsunami. Bradford Halloway, the man who had demanded Ilara's seat, was indicted 3 weeks later. The viral video had drawn the attention of the Department of Justice. They dug into his finances and found that the merger he was flying to London for was actually a money laundering scheme for a sanctioned oligarch. He was currently awaiting trial, his assets frozen, his Hamptons home seized. He had traded seat 1A for a concrete cell. And Carrie? Ilara found herself back at JFK on a Tuesday afternoon. She was flying to Tokyo, first class, on a different airline. She walked through the main concourse. She stopped at a kiosk to buy a bottle of water. "That will be $4, Mum," a tired voice said. Ilara looked down. The woman behind the counter wore a generic, ill-fitting polyester uniform of a contracted airport concessions company. Her blonde hair was no longer sprayed into a helmet. It was pulled back in a fraying elastic band. Her name tag simply read, Karen. Carrie looked up. She saw the customer. She saw the MIT hoodie. Recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her face went slack. The woman who had once commanded the skies, who had decided who was worthy of comfort and who wasn't, was now selling overpriced water to the people she used to look down on. Carrie didn't say a word. She couldn't. Shame sealed her throat. She simply pushed the water bottle across the counter, her hand trembling. Ilara took the water. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She offered a nod of acknowledgement, not of forgiveness, but of closure. "Keep the change," Ilara said gently. She turned and walked away, her sneakers making no sound on the polished floor, heading toward the lounge where the doors opened for her without question. She wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was the pilot of her own destiny, and she knew the flight path by heart. The story of Ilara Vance isn't just about a plane ticket. It's a brutal reminder that in the modern world, power isn't always visible. It doesn't always wear a suit, and it certainly doesn't always fly first class. Stratford Airlines and Carrie Sterling made the fatal mistake of judging a book by its cover, failing to realize that the woman in the hoodie owned the library. It serves as a stark warning to corporations and individuals alike. Bias is not just morally bankrupt, it is financially ruinous. In an age where every interaction can be recorded and every contract scrutinized, treating people with dignity isn't just nice. It's the only survival strategy. You never know who you're talking to, and you never know who has the power to ground your entire world. Wow, $1.4 billion lost because of one act of arrogance. If that story got your heart racing, make sure you hit that like button right now. It helps the algorithm find more stories like this. What would you have done if you were Ilara? Would you have taken the settlement money, or would you have grounded the planes? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories about karma hitting back hard against entitlement, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. You do not want to miss next week's video. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind to everyone, because you never know who's really in charge.